This is PPC Zone, February 2026, Show Me the Money. I'm your host, Jill Saskin-Gales. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm a Google Ads coach, ex-Googler, and the founder of the Inside Google Ads course, podcast, and book. I created PPC Zone in 2022 to elevate new perspectives and insights in our industry. Whether you're tuning in live, watching the replay on YouTube or LinkedIn, or listening in your podcast app right now, here's what you can expect. 3 speakers will each share their expertise in a 7-minute presentation each. Then we'll answer your questions in a live panel and wrap it all up in under an hour. PPC Zone is proudly sponsored by Usercentrics and Optmyzr. Optmyzr says they know your struggle. You want the power and efficiency of AI, but you can't afford to fully relinquish control of your voice, your brand, or your guardrails. Built with decades of learnings from seasoned PPC experts, Optmyzr bridges the gap with powerful, customizable tools and scripts, along with nimble and always learning AI sidekick. Sign up for a free demo and save time without relinquishing control at ai.ppc.zone. That's ai.ppc.zone. Usercentrics says, if your paid campaign leads hit the CRM, but the data feels incomplete or unreliable, then consent and data flow are often the issue. Cookiebot captures transparent user consent, while Usercentrics server-side tracking ensures only consented, high-quality data is sent securely to your CRM and analytics. If you want cleaner attribution and better lead quality, then Cookiebot plus Usercentrics server-side tracking is worth a look. Fix attribution at the source. Learn more at consent.ppc.zone. That's consent.ppc.zone. First up in the zone is a paid media manager who works at the intersection of Google Ads, conversion tracking, and CRMs. Today, she's here to share her perspective on when a conversion isn't a win, rethinking what we optimize for. Please welcome Breanne Bartlett.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Jill. As she mentioned, I'll be speaking to you all about when a conversion isn't a win, rethinking what we optimize for. I'm going to take you through the background of conversions and share what conversion tracking really looks like in 2026, specifically when it comes to lead generation in Google Ads. So to get started, I want to tell you a story about something that really happened to me, even though these are AI-generated images. I had just wrapped up a report for a client about their monthly Google Ads results, and things were looking really great. The cost per lead was down, lead volume was up, and I was prepared for the conversation with the client to go really well. In the meeting, I shared the results, and at the end, asked if they had any questions, and they kindly said, "That's great that the platform is showing promising results, but it's not translating on our end. Revenue is down, and we're worried we're not seeing the full picture here." I left that meeting feeling embarrassed, but determined to figure out a solution. That meeting was a wake-up call for me, but looking back, I realized I was just following the industry standard of the time and was in the middle of a shift to a new era. The way we define success in Google Ads has moved through 3 distinct eras. Back in 2005, we were in the click era. We were just happy to get traffic to our websites. Then for the last decade or so, we lived in the lead era. We became obsessed with the form fill. And for a long time, that was the standard. But recently, the game has changed again. Between AI-generated spam and sophisticated bots, a lead has shifted to a secondary insight. It's essentially the new CPC. We have officially entered the profit era, where the only metric that matters is business revenue. If you're still optimizing for lead volume, you're essentially using a 2016 playbook to solve today's problems. To show you what I mean, let's look at what this looks like inside an actual Google Ads account. Historically, we've been trained to stop at the first column here, leads. But as I mentioned earlier, a lead is just a starting point. By connecting the CRM to Google Ads, we finally see the full story. We can track the journey from MQL to opportunity to customer with revenue attached. This allows us to stop optimizing for cheap volume and start optimizing for lifetime customer value. Our jobs have shifted from focusing on form fills to finding the specific users who drive long-term revenue. This view shows the modern-day column structure Google Ads accounts should have. But here's the reality. You can't just toggle these columns on. Google doesn't know what happens in your CRM by default. To get this level of visibility I had on the last slide, we have to connect the platforms. We do that using two specific tools, enhanced conversions for leads and offline conversion tracking. Think of these as the bridge between leads and business profitability. Let's break down each of these options. First, there's enhanced conversions for leads. This is more of a light lift. It doesn't actually help train the algorithm on revenue. It just gives a little more data as to who's filling out the lead form. When a user fills out a form, it sends hashed first-party data, like an email address, back to Google. Google then matches that user to their ad click. It's privacy safe and captures the conversion, even if users switch devices. But the gold standard, the reason that screenshot I showed you in the last slide is possible, is offline conversion tracking, also known as OCT. This is where we connect the CRM, like HubSpot or Salesforce, directly to Google Ads. When the sales team moves a lead from meeting scheduled to closed won, that revenue value is automatically pushed back into Google Ads dashboard via the Google Click ID or hashed lead data. Implementation like this used to be a nightmare of manual uploads and spreadsheets. Today, with native CRM integrations, Zapier, and Google's Data Manager, it is a set it and forget it connection. With this setup, you're giving Google's AI the best signal possible it needs to stop bidding on spam and start bidding on customers. But connecting the platforms is just the setup. The real work begins in how you move forward. Now that Google actually knows which leads are making money, the entire strategy has to shift. You aren't just managing an account anymore, you're managing a revenue engine. Let's look deeper at these 3 steps for navigating this new profit era that we're in, starting with the place where most businesses lose their best opportunities, the valley of death. First, we need to diagnose what that is. In the startup world, the valley of death is where companies run out of cash before they hit profit. In our world, it's where good leads fall off because we aren't tracking the handoff between lead and the CRM. Use that data to see exactly where the lead stops. If you have 100 leads but 0 opportunities, don't just optimize the ad, change the offer or the qualifying questions on your form. You finally have the data to tell the client the ads are working, but the offer isn't. Second is bidding. This is the most important step. Move away from maximize conversions and shift to maximize conversion value. This tells the algorithm, stop looking for someone who will just fill out a form and start looking for the person who will be most likely to spend the most. Third is stop fearing the cost per lead spike. Your cost per lead might go up. In fact, I guarantee that it will, but your cost for acquisition will go down because you're no longer paying for bot traffic or low intent users. You're paying for profit. So be prepared for that spike in CPL, but that change in mindset will make it so you can finally start scaling for profitable customers. I want to be realistic with you. Setting up OCT isn't a magic button. It takes work and it requires real partnership between marketing and sales. But the reason I'm so focused on this is because I've sat in those meetings where the Google Ads dashboard is looking great for leads, but the business was struggling to grow. Connecting the CRM data to the ad account is the only way to help companies today grow. It forces us and the algorithm to focus on what actually keeps the business alive, which is revenue. My goal for today was to show you that the gap between a lead and a sale doesn't have to be a mystery and that you can actually optimize for business revenue with the right setup. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Breanne, for sharing your unique perspective and insights with us in the zone. I know this is a very common challenge that businesses, small and large alike, face, and you've laid out a really clear roadmap here for them to follow with examples. So thank you. If you'd like to connect with Breanne Bartlett, you can find her on LinkedIn. And if you have a question for Breanne, go ahead and type it into the chat if you're watching us live now on YouTube or LinkedIn, because we're going to get to your questions during the upcoming live panel. Before our next speaker, I want to thank Optmyzr and Usercentrics for sponsoring PPC Zone. Usercentrics says, if your paid campaign leads hit the CRM, but the data feels incomplete or unreliable, consent and data flow are often the issue. Cookiebot captures transparent user consent, while Usercentrics server-side tracking ensures only consented, high-quality data is sent securely to your CRM and analytics. If you want cleaner attribution and better lead quality, Cookiebot plus Usercentrics server-side tracking is worth a look. Fix attribution at the source. Learn more at consent.ppc.zone. Next up in the zone is a fellow ex-Googler who has been kicking butt as the founder of Scalix.ai. He's here to spill the tea on how to battle your Google Ads rep from an ex-Googler who actually set up those offshoring programs. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Waqas Khokhar.
Hey, Jill. Thanks for the intro. This is a spicy topic. Thanks for having me. I'm the founder and CEO of Scalix.ai. I left Google about 6 months ago and have been seeing a countless number of comments on LinkedIn and Reddit regarding your Google reps, and I thought it would be a great topic to discuss today. Quick background about myself: spent 9 years at Google, started on the new business sales team, and then I managed our vendor team, which was the last 4 years. And I do know exactly kind of what happens behind the scenes, and would love to dive a little bit more deeper into that. I'll give you a little bit of foundational background, but before I do, I just wanted to start the conversation off with: reps aren't evil, incentives are misaligned, use filter, not feelings. And what I wanted to share about this piece here is we're all human at the end of the day. And, Google reps are well-intentioned people. They do follow a playbook that we design or had designed to obviously grow Google's revenue. They're not here to sabotage the account. They're obviously reacting to internal incentives and feature adoptions, and obviously trying to drive incremental spend. So, really use a filter, obviously evaluate every suggestion against your own metrics, test the changes in isolation. And if a recommendation aligns with your goals, and it comes with evidence, obviously consider it. But understand they are measured by, certain internal metrics. And so use a filter, not feelings. There are many vendors. So the vendor that I managed was the Toronto vendor, which is Teleperformance. They have another vendor in Barcelona. Concentrix is a vendor that manages Manila, Argentina, and India, that specific market. T-Tech is the vendor out of Brazil, and Accenture is a new one out of India. I think there's maybe one new one that's also started. But the way it works is there's an APAC region, there's an EMEA region, and then there's a North America region, and each vendor would manage each of those specific regions. So if you're sitting in India and you're managing Google accounts there, you probably will get a call from either Concentrix or Accenture. If you're in Spain, you're probably going to hear from someone from Teleperformance from Barcelona. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a structure of how they all work. There's 2 to 3 main metrics that are measured for these Google reps. And there's a depth metric with it, which is called UAAs, which is unique accounts adopted. The breadth metric is basically counted about how many advertisers have been persuaded to complete at least 2 recommended tasks, such as like adding negative keywords, raising mobile bid adjustments, launching a specific campaign, and each completed advertiser gets a 1 UA, but most strategists need to log around 150 UAs per quarter to meet targets. And then the points is the depth metric, which is basically measured on the total value of the task performed. So tasks that could potentially increase an advertiser spend, for example, like raising the budgets, were assigned to point values, and tasks like adding negative keywords, you hit a quarterly goal, and strategists had to average about 30 points per UAA. So like a low value 2-point UA had to be balanced with a high value 75-point UA elsewhere. And then some programs, so there's the vendor teams, there's AGT, there's mid-market, there's LCS. There's different scale of teams based on the bright lines or how much you're spending on Google. A team like AGT, for example, would be measured on all 3, whereas the vendor would be only measured on points and UAs. So I would want to leave you with 3 pieces of advice on how to measure or how to manage your Google reps. One is leverage them where you need, right? We all come across billing issues, policy issues, bugs, tickets that we need to submit. When you do have that, be very firm with how you would want them to escalate that on your behalf. Talk about how it's a blocker, talk about the client, and just make sure that you really are, when you're running into these administrative tasks, that you can lean into your rep for help. The third one is always request evidence. Ask for third-party validations, ask for case studies. If someone is making you turn on AI Max, or someone is making you, turn on broad match, for whatever it is, ask for evidence, ask for ask for validation, and say, hey, where have you seen this, or on another account? Is there a case study that you can share? And obviously take that, and then just kind of decide on your end whether or not that's something you would be open to testing or implementing on your side. And then set boundaries. I know we are all gonna get phone calls. We're all gonna get emails. Set boundaries with your rep. You can tell your rep how often you want to be contacted and through which channel. So, if calls are becoming intrusive, obviously adjust your communication preferences. Even, with emails, if, rather than emailing you weekly, just set clear boundaries and let them know how often you want them to reach out. Because they will reach out. It's part of their outreach plan. So those are 3 pieces of advice I'd probably leave you with. It is going to be a constant battle, and like I said, it's a spicy topic, but I wanted to leave you all with these 3 pieces of advice. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But thank you, and passing it over back to Jill.
Thank you so much, Waqas, for sharing your unique perspective and insights with us in the zone. This is definitely a spicy topic, but you shared some really interesting tidbits that I think will help people understand how to communicate with their Google rep a little bit better. So thank you. If you'd like to connect with Waqas Khokhar, you can find him on LinkedIn. And if you have a question for Waqas, go ahead and type it into the chat if you're watching live on YouTube or LinkedIn right now, and we'll get to your questions during the upcoming live panel. If you're just tuning in, PPC Zone is proudly sponsored by Usercentrics and Optmyzr. Optmyzr says they know your struggle. You want the power and efficiency of AI, but you can't afford to fully relinquish control of your voice, your brand, or your guardrails. Built with decades of learnings from seasoned PPC experts, Optmyzr bridges that gap with powerful, customizable tools and scripts, along with a nimble and always learning AI sidekick. Sign up for a free demo to save time without relinquishing control at ai.ppc.zone. Our final speaker in the zone today is the Chief Strategy Officer of Optmyzr. He teaches at conferences, universities, and his own training programs. And now he's here on the PPC Zone stage to tell us how paid media plus CRM equals performance. Please welcome my friend, Danny Gavin.
Thank you, Jill. It's awesome to be here. So I recently audited an account spending $10,000 a month on Google Ads. On paper, everything looked great. 200 leads per month, which is a respectable cost per lead. But when I looked at their CRM, the reality was brutal. Only 12 of those 200 leads were actually qualified. 12! That's a 6% qualification rate. But here's where it gets worse. Of those 12 qualified leads, only 3 of them closed. And all 3 came from one campaign that they were about to shut down because it had the highest cost per lead. They were optimizing on the completely wrong metric. And this isn't an outlier. I see this pattern in many of the accounts that I review. Side note, today I'm going to focus on HubSpot as the CRM of choice, but variations of this will apply to other CRMs as well. So after working on and auditing hundreds of lead gen campaigns, I've identified 3 points where visibility consistently breaks down. Number 1, the UTMs or tracking disappear. The setup looks perfect in Google Ads, but the attribution never makes it into the CRM. So why is this? It's all about the form setup, which you think is simple, but it breaks down. Third-party form tools that don't pass the parameters into the CRM, cookie blocking, form redirects that strip the UTMs away. The result is that leads showing up in HubSpot as direct traffic, even though you paid $47 for that click. This is the most common issue I find. Second, CRM data quality is inconsistent. In my experience, the CRM is only as good as the discipline around it. If the deal stages don't get updated, deal values are missing, everything gets marked qualified regardless of fit. So even when attribution works, the data being sent back to Google Ads can't be trusted. And finally, number 3, offline conversions aren't configured. This is the critical gap. Google Ads knows someone filled out a form, but it never learns they became a customer. Smart bidding ends up optimizing for form fills that go nowhere instead of form fills that actually close into customers. And therefore, the algorithm is flying blind. So now let's work through our 3 solutions, or golden nuggets, like I like to call them. So number 1, the 3-tier conversion architecture. Here's what I teach. You don't track just one conversion. You architect 3 tiers and you layer them strategically. The best practitioners I work with all use this framework, but each with their own recipe. So tier 3 is the contact created. This is going to be your form fill. Set this as your primary conversion action so Google can bid on volume. But here's the critical distinction. Don't make your final optimization decisions based on this metric. You want to use it for learning, not for the decision making. Tier 2, marketing qualified leads. This is where the strategy gets sophisticated. Create a workflow like in HubSpot that automatically tags leads as marketing qualified. It could be based on their fit. So it could be job title, company size, budget signals. If it's a healthcare company, the correct insurance, whatever defines quality for your business. Then send that information back to Google Ads as a conversion. And a pro tip, you want to weight these middle tier conversions. If the average customer value is $5,000, set the MQL conversion value at approximately $500, which would be 10% of the expected value. This way, smart bidding isn't just optimizing for qualified leads, it's also optimizing for valuable qualified leads. The math matters here. And then finally, your tier 1, that's going to be your deal closed 1, the actual deals that turn into customers. Track this as a conversion. But you may have to set it to observe mode. And why is this? The reason is because B2B sales cycles typically run 60, 30, 60, 90 days or longer. If you optimize this directly, you may not have enough data or sufficient conversion volume to learn from, but you absolutely need visibility into this for your reporting and analysis. And a pro tip, use HubSpot's deal created date for offline conversion timing, not the deal close date, because Google Ads requires the conversion to occur within 90 days of the click. And if someone clicked in January but didn't close until June, that data can't be utilized directly in the platform by the algorithm. All right, let's talk about golden nugget number 2, the HubSpot Ads dashboard secret. Once you connect your Google Ads to HubSpot, which takes about 60 seconds, you unlock a dashboard that fundamentally changes your analysis. You just have to go to marketing, ads, reports. Now you're viewing your campaigns next to your CRM data. So the interface will show you your standard metrics, your campaign name, your impressions, your clicks. But now you can also see how many contacts were created, how many deals were generated, what's the cost per contact, cost per deal, and so on and so forth. All of this in one unified view. Pro tip, what I like to do in order to get your best attribution, you can also go to your contacts and deals and create a filter to see all your contacts and deals, whether that first source was Google, whether the last source was Google, or it might even be in the middle, but you can sort it by every contact that has a GSIL ID, a Google Click ID, or if you're running a Facebook campaign, a Facebook Click ID. Golden nugget number 3 is the optimization snowball. Once you have complete visibility, connect Google Ads to your CRM. You unlock optimization layers that most PPCers never access. I think of this as a snowball effect. Each of the 4 layers builds on the previous one. Layer 1, campaign and keyword optimization. This is the obvious layer, right? Now you can shift budget to campaigns that are actually driving customers. But here's the nuance that separates good from great. Don't just analyze close rate in isolation. You also want to analyze that deal size. So imagine if you have a campaign that has a 15% close rate, but the deal size is $2,000, and another one that has an 8% close rate at a $12,000 average deal size. That lower close rate campaign has 3 times better economics because the average order value is higher. Layer 2, you can analyze landing pages better. You can identify which landing pages convert leads but don't produce customers. A free trial page might generate a high sign-up volume, but it might set low. It will have a low close rate and just bring you tire kickers. A consultation booking page might have fewer conversions, but a 30% close rate. So the data is telling you where to redirect your traffic. You can also now, layer 3, optimize your audiences. Export your closed customer list from HubSpot and upload it as a customer match audience. You might want to create a qualify but not closed segment and run targeted nurture campaigns or retargeting campaigns. And the final layer, sales process diagnostics, which is leaning more away from Google Ads but to the CRM, this is the layer that nobody expects. The data could reveal that certain campaigns generate leads that never receive follow-ups. And this is something Menachem Ani recently posted on LinkedIn, right? A lead could sit there for 5 days before being contacted, right? So you can't fix these issues in Google Ads, but surfacing them creates organizational value beyond the platform. So the reality check. Let me be direct about the implementation. It requires actual work. You got to connect your accounts, configure your forms correctly, implement your UTM tracking, do your MQL tagging, configure your offline conversions, establish a CRM discipline within your organization, right? There are a lot of things, but here's the economic reality. If you're spending more than $5,000 a month on lead gen campaigns, this infrastructure pays for itself in just 1 month. So you got to do it in order to eliminate the underperformers and properly scale on the winners. So you face a choice. Continue optimizing for leads and hope they convert to customers, or implement systems that actually show you which leads become customers and optimize based on that reality. The practitioners who make this shift, who track customers instead of leads, these are the ones who successfully scale accounts. They're the ones who earn executive trust. They're the ones who become strategically indispensable. And frankly, in 2026, if you're still optimizing in form fills alone, like Breanne said, you're competing with one hand tied behind your back. This isn't optional anymore. It's foundational. Thank you so much. And back to you, Jill.
Thank you so much, Danny, for sharing your unique perspectives and insights with us on the zone. So many nuggets that I'm sure folks are going to have to watch the replay or tune into the podcast episode to take more notes. So thank you. If you'd like to connect with Danny Gavin, you can find him on LinkedIn. And if you have a question for Danny, go ahead and type it into the chat if you're watching live on YouTube or LinkedIn right now, as we are about to get started with our live panel. Let's bring all of our speakers back on screen now. All right, this is PPC Zone, February 2026, and we are talking about how to make Google Ads show you the money. I'm your host, Jill Saskin-Gales. I'm a Google Ads coach, ex-Googler, and the founder of the Inside Google Ads course, podcast, and book. I created PPC Zone to elevate new perspectives and insights in our industry. I'm here with Breanne Bartlett, paid media manager, who just spoke about when a conversion isn't a win. I'm here with Waqas Khokhar, founder at Scalix AI, who just spoke about how to work with your Google Ads rep. It was pretty spicy. And then I'm here with Danny Gavin, chief strategy officer at Optmyzr, who just spoke about how paid media plus CRM equals performance. Feel free to keep typing your questions into the chat. We are going to get to those in just a moment. But first, another word from our sponsors, Optmyzr and Usercentrics. Usercentrics says if your paid campaign leads hit the CRM, but then the data feels incomplete or unreliable, then consent and data flow are often the issue. Cookiebot captures transparent user consent, while user-centric server-side tracking ensures only consented, high-quality data is sent securely to your CRM and analytics. If you want cleaner attribution and better lead quality, Cookiebot plus user-centric server-side tracking is worth a look. Fix attribution at the source. Learn more at consent.ppc.zone. Optmyzr says they know your struggle. You want the power and efficiency of AI, but you can't afford to fully relinquish control of your voice, your brand, or your guardrails. Built with decades of learnings from seasoned PPC experts, Optmyzr bridges that gap with powerful, customizable tools and scripts, along with a nimble and always learning AI sidekick. Sign up for a free demo to save time without relinquishing control at ai.ppc.zone. Welcome back to the screen to all of our speakers today. So my first question for you, I've met with many business owners over the years who are just tracking a phone call or a form fill, and they understand the idea that they need to do more, but as you've mentioned, it can be very intimidating to actually do that. So for a business owner who wants to get started with offline conversion tracking, I'll ask each of you, I know Waqas, you have experience with this as well, what's like the number one step they could take? What's the first step in what will eventually be a multi-step process? I'll start with you, Danny. What would you recommend as the first step?
Yeah, so we have this beautiful thing called a Google Sheet or a Google spreadsheet. And I think it's as easy as literally adding, once you get a lead, sticking it in there line by line. And for each lead, at that point, you can say, was it qualified? Was it not qualified? Did it turn a customer? Did it not? So you basically have a central system. In a way, it's kind of like a basic CRM that anyone can set up. But setting up this framework will then allow you to say, okay, this is what is qualified, this is what converted. And then if you've set it up the correct way, we can spend more time later. You can then upload that data back into Google Ads.
Got it. So first, just keeping score of what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Breanne, would you recommend the same starting point or would you start somewhere different?
Yeah, honestly, very similar. The first thing that came to mind was just start tracking what the stages are. So when a lead comes in, maybe track, did you contact them? And just going from there, I feel like those steps kind of get missed sometimes. And so if you're just starting out, that can feel like a heavy lift, but over time, it's going to really set the foundation for what we talked about today, which is, moving on to maybe a qualified lead and then an opportunity, and then attaching the value of the end customer. Just getting in the practice of updating your leads, whether that be a Google Sheet or in your CRM, because a lot of times businesses will scale without having that as the foundation. And that's where we run into a lot of the troubles that Danny and I mentioned today.
And Waqas, I know you've worked with a lot of businesses like this before. So any other advice you have for a business owner who I know I should do this, but how do I even get started?
I mean, Danny and Breanne did a phenomenal job of explaining it. I would just say, as a business owner, or if you're on the Google Ads side and managing the account, just become annoyingly obsessive on a feedback loop, because I feel like we don't do that enough. And if you're not getting the feedback quickly, it's lost data, and then you're not getting that back into Google Ads. So be obsessive and annoying in terms of getting the feedback from what's working well and what's not working well.
It's true, because numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story. Like I was actually just on a call today where Google Ads is only showing 20% of the actual leads that are coming from Google Ads. So it's like, okay, we know there's an issue. We don't know what the issue is, but at least we know there's a discrepancy because we're paying attention and we can see it. And now we can figure out how to solve it. We have a question here from Nava Hopkins of Microsoft Advertising. How do you determine if you can trust your conversion data? And what are the tells in the data that help you know if there's either false positives or false negatives? I'll open this to the panel. Who would like to take a stab at Nava's question?
So I think what's nice is we have form fills or phone calls. And therefore, if you're looking at that data and you're looking at your Google Ads data, it's like what you just said, Jill. Those numbers should be pretty close. Now, obviously, there can be discrepancies and things like that. But because we have the end result, we have what those final contacts are, and we know what Google Ads is tracking, you have to look at both. And therefore, sometimes in agencies or departments, if you're just reporting back on the conversions that are within the platform, right, then you'll never see that. But if you're reporting on the phone calls and on the form fills as well, you'll be able to keep that in mind. And I think that at that point, you can see if there's a large discrepancy between those two numbers, something is going wrong there.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I know that initially you can just get started with a Google Sheet, as you mentioned, but at some point you'll probably need some kind of software, whether it's Zapier to connect the Google Sheet or whether it's HubSpot's been mentioned. So I'd love if each of you can share if you have examples of specific software that either you've used or your clients have used. I'm not saying this is necessarily an endorsement, but just some specific software folks might want to look into if they're thinking of taking that next step with offline conversion tracking. I'll start with you, Breanne. Is there any software or tools you'd recommend to folks?
Sure. And I actually just ran into this the other month where the data that we were sending from the platform, and this is not even on the lead level, it's purely just traffic level with all of the cookie privacy things going on these days. There was a big discrepancy in between our Google Ads clicks and our GA4 traffic. And so one thing that we ended up doing was we added our website to Microsoft Clarity. It's a Microsoft tool that shows you insights of what's going on your website, but it also shows sessions and things like that. Also has the same privacy things over there, but it was good to just add an additional platform to the mix to compare against. So I feel like that kind of helps answer Nava's question as well. As something I'd recommend is use these separate tools and use as many as you can and compare and maybe find the average between all of them. And if one of the few is extremely different, then you found your outlier and that one is likely not accurately tracking. So I would say Microsoft Clarity as far as traffic has been a huge help. We love using that.
That's a great tip. No tool is going to be exactly right. They're all wrong, but they're all a little bit wrong from each other, and that can help you spot outliers. I actually had Sophie Logan deliver a great workshop for my Inside Google Ads course members about Microsoft Clarity. So it's a great tip, and it's free. Is that right, Breanne?
Yep, it's free. You just connect it through the website or Google Tag Manager.
Awesome. What about you, Waqas? Any tools or resources that can help folks who are in the earlier stages of this process?
Yeah, I feel like I deal with a lot of B2B SaaS clients, and so I primarily either deal with HubSpot or I deal with Salesforce. And HubSpot, I don't know if you all are facing this, but facing a lot of issues recently with HubSpot. But Microsoft Clarity is very good because you can pull the G-Click ID from there. And I think the foundational piece is the conversion tracking, right? So you have to make sure you're constantly QAing your conversion tracking to make sure that the data is flowing. You're pulling the UTM parameters, you're collecting the G-Click IDs, and our source of truth is going to be the HubSpot data where the lead is getting pulled in from. But also, I ask my client 6 times and confirming whether or not that lead came from Google, and using every sort of strategy to weed out whether or not it was not from Google or not. So I think you have to have that constant feedback loop from the client to make sure there's nothing else, blurring the lines between what is coming from Google and what isn't. And early on, things might break, things might not work well, but it does get ironed out eventually.
And then when it is, you still, if the last time you checked on your conversion tracking was 5 years ago, it may be time to do a little audit and make sure it's all working properly. And Danny, I believe you're a HubSpot user. Is that right?
I am. I'm a huge HubSpot fan. So offline, we should go over like what problems you see. But outside of that, even HubSpot has its limitations. I think for PPC or Zapier, depending how you pronounce it, is really your best friend. because it allows you to connect one platform to the next really easily. And therefore, whether the information is being put into a Google Sheet and you need to get that into Google Ads, or even in HubSpot, it's got some limitations on which deal stages it can send back into Google Ads. And therefore, I often will have a Zapier and a HubSpot working together at the same time. Just allows me to be really nimble. So what's also nice now, just with Zapier, kind of like a shout out, is you can add an AI step as well in the workflow. So if you need to do any sort of clarification or filtering without like programming JavaScript, but literally just putting in a prompt, that's also really cool. So I think every PPCer, that should be a tool in your chest, because no matter what situation you can go in, I would say like 80 to 90% of the situations, you could use that tool to help you get your data back into Google Ads.
Where it needs to go. Awesome. And Govind Singh has a question here saying a lot of the time clients don't share the leads data. Sometimes they don't trust Google to share it to Google, or maybe they just can't share it with you for some reason. And so it's really hard to make small business owners understand how important there is. So any advice here for Govind and others who are having trouble convincing their client of how important this is and that it should be a priority? Because as we've mentioned, it can be cumbersome. You often need tools and things. So what advice would you have for a PPCer to convince their client that this is something that needs to be done?
So I think that like Breanne clearly said, like in 2026, if you want to do Google Ads for lead gen, you have to do this. It's just part of the equation. And if you don't, it's just not worth it. So obviously you're going to have those clients who don't want to do it. And I would say they're just not a good fit. And maybe that's not something you should work with, because if you can't make them successful, then it's just not going to work. And it's hard. It's taken me a long time to say no to clients. I'm sure all of you have been in situations where it's like, ooh, is the money worth it or not? But it's like, man, if we can't do our jobs correctly, it's not the right fit.
Amen. So it's better to not take on the client in the first place than to take them on with unrealistic expectations. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. Jasper has a question. Any feedback with AI Max? Any folks want to share their experiences testing AI Max so far?
I can jump in here.
Yeah.
I've tested it, and so far the results have not been better than my standard campaigns. So that's just my firsthand experience. But I will say, as we're on this topic of offline conversion tracking, my mindset recently has kind of changed with these new, these new features, AI Max, even Performance Max, where these types of campaigns that are fully automated, I personally don't use them unless I have a really dialed in offline conversion tracking import, because without those really strong signals, I've seen that spam and AI bots take over the traffic and it will just be spam. So, with AI Max and this topic, I would just say, make sure you have what we've talked about today in place. And then I would say, feel free to test it. But, even with that in place, I've seen mixed results. So, waiting to test it again for a few months. I feel like that's what happened in the early days of Performance Max, and now I have it on a lot of my accounts. So I'm not going to say never, but as of today, AI Max is still not a standard in my accounts. Yeah.
Fair
enough. Yeah.
What about you, Waqas? I know you work with a lot of high growth startups. Is this something you've been using? And if not, what are you really focusing on these days?
Yeah, tested it a lot. It has not worked. Again, I think with B2B SaaS, in order for it to work, I feel like you just need a high volume of very bottom of the funnel conversion. So that is like a HubSpot customer. And we don't get enough of them. So turning on AI Max has been, a lot of irrelevant search terms, or even PMax has been a lot of spam leads, just because we don't have enough those bottom funnel conversions coming in. I have seen it though work for, I think, e-commerce, and we all know, Google's products are designed for e-commerce businesses. So I think it just really depends on the industry and the vertical you're managing. But for me, primarily, it just hasn't worked well so far.
Got it. I was going to wrap up. We've got two questions that just came in at the final minute that I would love for us to address here. So first, this one's for Waqas specifically from Zishan Ali. How much freedom do Google reps actually have in giving customized advice versus following internal targets?
It's a really good question, Zishan. They have the full freedom to give whatever advice they would want. Some reps do give the advice that's needed to make a customer successful, but that means then they sacrifice on hitting the internal targets. So it's a bit of a balancing approach, to be honest. Some will try to obviously pitch their product, and it doesn't get adopted, and then eventually it'll just be like, hey, you need to do this, this, and this. And it really is, they have the full freedom to do that. And there are some that do it. There are some that don't. They feel compelled to hit their targets. Some people that are achieving their targets will then switch behaviors and then get a little bit more on the client side. So they do have the full freedom to share the right strategies. And most of them, when I do speak to them, they know what the right thing is for Google and the right thing is for the client. So yeah, full freedom is there.
Got it. Thank you for that perspective. And then last question, maybe I'll ask this of Danny. This question comes from a user on YouTube. Any suggestions for conversion tracking offline and online for medical practices where HIPAA compliance is an issue? Do you recommend any tools that are affordable?
So what I would say is that, especially with HIPAA, there's a range of like what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Different companies have different things. So that's just the first concept. In very large organizations where a lot of the conversion actually happens would be within their medical record system, and you can't put any conversion tracking there. So when we're talking about online conversion tracking, sometimes you have to get creative in how you can tie in. One way to do that is to create like a form ahead of time before someone actually enters, and then you can connect their email address once they put that form to that EHR or EMR. One thing to remember is that when you are putting data back into Google Ads, a lot of that is anonymous. So yes, you would have a name, you would have a phone number or an email address, but if you're not saying what the medical condition is or anything like that, then technically it is anonymous. But obviously every company, every organization will have their own standards, and therefore you'd have to double check with their legal departments exactly what they consider or not. But I have seen a breadth of like, when someone says HIPAA, it really sort of depends. But the point is that in a pure sense of the word, where when you have an identifiable information to an actual medical condition and you put that together, that's when there's a problem. But when you remove that away and you just have anonymized data, either because you have the person without what that problem is, or the problem is without the person, in that case, it can be in a safe manner to upload.
It's a great distinction. Of course, always check with your lawyer. I will also say we have had two speakers on PPC Zone before talk about this, so you can look up Marjorie Vizethin's PPC Zone talk, as well as Abby Nelson. Both of them were, I believe, in 2025. All right, our time today is wrapping up. Thank you once again to Breanne, Waqas, Danny, and you for joining us here today. Our next event will be in April 2026, featuring Sarah Saul, Brian Lassonde, and Nikki Kuhlman. If you would like to apply to speak at an upcoming event, you can do so on our website at ppc.zone. Thank you one more time to our sponsors, Usercentrics and Optmyzr, for supporting our mission to elevate new perspectives and insights in our industry. You can learn more about Optmyzr at ai.ppc.zone and about Usercentrics at consent.ppc.zone. I'm your host, Jill Saskin-Gales. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn or subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss future PPC Zone events. I look forward to seeing you next time in the zone.